The screams hit me before I even stepped outside. The air smelled like chlorine and chaos mixed together. Out by the pool, Victoria Whitmore, our mighty HOA president, was thrashing in the water, her perfect blonde hair stuck to her face as she clawed at her skin. Around her, a handful of guests were shouting, jumping out, scratching themselves like they just rolled in poison ivy. The pool itself looked calm and clear, almost mocking them. I stood at the patio door, iced tea in hand, just watching the scene unfold. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie. Victoria turned toward me, her face bright red and furious. "You poisoned us, Anthony. I'm calling the police." I took a slow sip, met her eyes, and said quietly, "Funny, I don't remember inviting you." A few moments later, I could already hear sirens in the distance. Neighbors peeked through their fences, and as the red and blue lights started flashing across my backyard, one thought ran through my head. Maybe peace really did have a price. Before we get into how all this happened, drop your city and time in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because this one's a ride. They say every man has his own version of the American dream. Mine wasn't about yachts or fancy cars. I just wanted peace. A quiet backyard, a clear blue pool that caught the sunlight, and enough space to breathe after 25 years of 9-to-5 chaos. When I first moved into Maplewood Heights, the place felt like paradise. Manicured lawns, clean sidewalks, friendly waves from strangers. The kind of neighborhood that made you think, yeah, I finally made it. For a while, that dream held up. I come home from work, fire up the grill, take a swim as the sun dipped behind the trees, and just relax. My backyard was my sanctuary, a little blue corner of calm in a busy world. Then one Sunday morning, that peace cracked. I walked out half asleep with a cup of coffee and almost dropped it when I saw two teenagers splashing around in my pool. A boy and a girl, maybe 16, laughing like they owned the place. At first, I wasn't even angry, just confused. Maybe they wandered in by mistake, I thought. Maybe they were chasing a ball or something. But then the girl waved and said, "Morning, Mr. Lewis. Mom said we could swim here since it's community property." I blinked. Sorry, what? And then I heard that voice, sharp, confident, and dripping with fake sweetness. Victoria Whitmore, standing on my driveway in her oversized sunglasses and floral dress, holding her clipboard like it was a badge. "Oh, Anthony, I'm so sorry," she said, smiling wide. The kids must have misunderstood. Since we're all part of the same HOA, they just assumed your pool was, shared space. I forced a laugh. Right? Except it's fenced and attached to my house. She waved it off. Of course. I'll make sure they know next time. Next time? Those two words should have been a warning. But I let it go. Figured it was just a misunderstanding. A few days later, I came home from work and heard music coming from the backyard. When I opened the gate, there they were again, the Whitmore kids, plus two of their friends, floating on my inflatable flamingo, sipping sodas like it was a resort. "Hey, Mr. L," one of them called. "Your pool's awesome." I just stood there, speechless. "Where's your mom?" And right on cue, Victoria appeared from behind the hedge like she'd been waiting for her entrance. "Anthony," she said cheerfully, "I was just telling them to wrap it up. You know how kids are." "Victoria, this is private property," I said, trying hard to stay polite. Her smile tightened. Of course, I understand completely. Except she didn't. Not all. By the end of that week, it became routine. Every day, I'd come home to find towels on my chairs, wet footprints on the deck, empty snack bags floating in the skimmer. One afternoon, her husband Doug was sitting by the pool with a beer. "Hey neighbor," he said with a grin. "You've really got this backyard thing figured out. HOA should give you a medal." I forced a smile. "Or maybe they should give you your own pool." He laughed, missing the point completely. For a while, I tried being subtle, locking the gate, leaving polite notes, even texting Victoria reminders about boundaries. Every time, she replied the same way. "Oh, Anthony, you're overreacting. We're neighbors, not strangers." The thing about people like Victoria is they feed off politeness. The more patient you are, the more they push. Then came the letter. It was tucked in my mailbox, sealed with the HOA emblem. Notice of violation. Apparently, my pool activities caused excessive noise and visual clutter inconsistent with community harmony. It was signed by, you guessed it, Victoria Whitmore, HOA president. I almost laughed. She'd weaponized the HOA against me, using my own backyard as evidence. That evening, I walked over to her house. She answered the door with that same fake smile. "Oh, Anthony, did you get the notice?" "Nothing personal, just standard enforcement. We all have to follow the rules, right?" "Right," I said, "even the ones about trespassing." Her smile faltered just for a second. Then she said, "Oh, don't be dramatic. We're just keeping the neighborhood peaceful." That night, sitting by the pool in the quiet glow of the porch light, I realized something important. People like Victoria don't respect kindness. They mistake it for weakness. So I started documenting everything, every visit, every footprint, every word. I installed cameras disguised as garden lights, motion sensors, timestamps. At first, it wasn't about revenge. It was about proof. But after a while, I started to see what this really was. It wasn't about logic anymore. It was about humiliation. A week later, I overheard Victoria telling another neighbor, "Anthony's pool adds so much value to the neighborhood. We practically consider it communal now." That word, communal, was the last straw. I didn't yell. I didn't confront her. I just smiled and waved. And inside, I started a different kind of project. That night, I cleaned the pool, checked the filters, made sure everything was perfect. Nothing suspicious. Because revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, and perfectly timed. The next morning, when I saw Victoria across the fence watering her roses, I raised my coffee cup and nodded. She smiled back, thinking she'd won. She had no idea. By the next week, my backyard wasn't mine anymore. It had become some kind of neighborhood hangout. Towels on the fence, flip-flops on the deck, half-eaten chips floating near the skimmer. My peaceful sanctuary now looked like a public pool after a summer carnival. The final straw came on a Saturday afternoon. I've been stuck in traffic for hours, exhausted from a business trip, dreaming of nothing but a quiet swim. But when I turned onto my street, I hit the brakes. My driveway was blocked by two SUVs, both parked halfway across my property line. From behind my house, I suddenly heard laughter, splashing, and some terrible pop music blaring. Curious, and honestly already a bit uneasy, I followed the noise toward my backyard. What I saw next made my stomach drop. There were at least 20 people in my backyard. Victoria was stretched out on one of my deck chairs, sipping a margarita like she owned the place. Her husband, Doug, was flipping burgers on my grill. Kids I'd never even seen before were cannonballing into my pool, water flying everywhere. I froze at the gate, completely stunned. One of them even waved at me, as if I was the guest. "Hey, Anthony," Victoria called out, her voice dripping with fake cheer. "Hope you don't mind. The kids just wanted to have a little fun while the weather's nice. We'll clean up when we're done." I clenched my jaw so tight it hurt. "Victoria," I said slowly, trying to stay calm, "you're on my property again." She just waved me off. "Oh, relax. We're all neighbors. What's the harm? You've got such a big heart and such a big pool." For a second, I thought about losing it, yelling, throwing everyone out, maybe even calling the police. But then I took a deep breath and realized something. Yelling wouldn't fix this. People like Victoria didn't understand boundaries. They only understood consequences. So instead, I quietly walked back into the house, grabbed my phone, and pulled up the HOA bylaws I'd downloaded weeks earlier. I scrolled through the sections, property access, private amenities, trespassing liability, and started taking notes. Meanwhile, I sipped cold water from the fridge and listened to their party echo through my walls. While they laughed and splashed around, my security cameras recorded everything. Every guest, every beer can, every second of noise. By the time the sun began to set, I had hours of footage. When I stepped outside again, the crowd was finally thinning out. Victoria looked up from her drink and smiled that same rehearsed, sugary smile. "See? We kept it under control this time." "Sure," I said evenly. "Just remember what you said earlier." She tilted her head. "What did I say?" "That you'd clean up when you're done." Her smile faltered. But of course, when they all left, my pool looked like a swamp. Chips floating, soggy napkins stuck to the side, beer cans everywhere, and muddy footprints all over my porch. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my computer and started editing the footage, labeling every clip, every timestamp. By then, I wasn't even angry. I was focused, because I knew, this time, she'd crossed a line she couldn't talk her way out of. But Victoria wasn't finished. 3 days later, I opened my mailbox to find another HOA notice. This one claimed that I was creating visual disharmony by having excessive pool activity visible from neighboring homes. I actually laughed out loud. The same woman who'd turned my backyard into a public resort was now accusing me of causing a disturbance. That was it. Something inside me snapped, not in rage, but in clarity. That evening, I went for a walk around the neighborhood. On the community notice board, I spotted a fresh flyer. Maplewood Heights HOA monthly pool safety meeting, hosted by President Victoria Whitmore. Her smiling face was printed right at the bottom. I couldn't help but chuckle. Pool safety, I muttered. Oh, the irony. When I got home, Doug was across the street watering his lawn. He waved his hose at me. Hey, Tony. Vic says thanks for letting us use the pool again. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I said flatly. I'm sure you do. He laughed. You know, it's good for the neighborhood spirit. Brings people together. I gave a small smile. Oh, it's about to bring people together, Doug. Just not the way you think. That night, I checked my shed, cameras, motion sensors, everything in perfect working order. Then, a different idea crept into my mind. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to sue. I was going to teach. I opened my laptop and typed, "Itch powder pool harmless prank." I'd heard of it before. Totally harmless, non-toxic, but it caused mild skin irritation when mixed with water. Just enough to make people itch like crazy. Perfect. I ordered a few packets, the kind used for college pranks, and waited. During those few days, I played the polite neighbor. I waved at Victoria, complimented her garden, even offered her some leftover pool supplies. She thought she'd won. But really, I was counting down the days. When the package finally arrived, it came in a plain brown box. Inside were 3 small bags of fine white powder. Looked like sugar. Felt like victory. Saturday afternoon rolled around. Perfect weather, sunny and calm. And right on schedule, Victoria's yard buzzed with activity again. Tables, speakers, coolers. She was hosting another community event. At my pool. So, at 6 that morning, before anyone was awake, I took my coffee mug and that brown box out to the backyard. I sprinkled the powder gently into the pool, turned on the filter jets, and watched it dissolve completely, invisible. Then I went back inside, made breakfast, and waited. By noon, I heard the familiar chaos. Laughter, splashing music. I peeked through the blinds. There they were again, Victoria, Doug, and half the neighborhood lounging like royalty. 10 minutes later came the first scream. A woman shouted, "Something's biting me." Another yelled, "My arms." They're on fire. Kids started crying. Adults were scratching, splashing to the edges. Chaos erupted in seconds. Victoria jumped up, red blotches all over her arms, yelling at Doug. "What did you put in the water?" Doug shouted back. "I didn't touch anything." I couldn't help but smile. I stepped outside with a glass of iced tea, just in time to see the full scene. People slipping, screaming, tripping over each other. My backyard looked like a battlefield of confusion. Victoria locked eyes with me, furious. "You did this," she screamed. "You poisoned us, Anthony." I took a calm sip. "You mean my private property? The one you broke into again?" Her jaw dropped. "You'll pay for this." I tilted my head slightly. "You mean like the 6 months of unpaid HOA dues you owe?" The look on her face, pure shock. As she fumbled for her phone to call 911, I turned and walked back inside. Not to hide, just to wait. Because I knew what was coming next. Soon, I heard the distant sound of sirens. And for the first time since moving to Maplewood Heights, I felt calm. When the police finally arrived, I was already sitting on my patio, legs crossed, sipping my drink like I was watching a movie. The lights from the cruisers flashed across the pool as officers got out, clearly baffled by the scene. Victoria ran toward them, drenched and frantic. "Officers, you poisoned us. You put something in that water," she yelled, pointing at me like she'd just caught a criminal. I stayed seated, glass in hand. "Good afternoon, officers," I said politely. You might want to ask them why they were in my backyard to begin with. One officer frowned. Sir, is this your property? Yes, I said, handing him a copy of my deed I conveniently kept by the patio door. Everything inside this fence is private property. You can check the address. Victoria's voice cracked with outrage. Don't listen to him. He's been hostile for months. I'm the HOA president. We have rights to shared amenities. The officer blinked. Shared amenities? She pointed toward the pool. It's visible from other homes. It counts as a community visual space. He can't legally keep it to himself. The officer just stared at her, speechless. Then he turned to me. You got that on camera, sir? I smiled. Every second. And I led him to my tablet, where 4 camera angles showed everything crystal clear. The footage told the whole story. Victoria's family hopping my fence, using a copied key to unlock the gate, and turning my backyard into a full-blown party without asking me. The officer watched the clips, expression stoic. That's pretty straightforward, he said. Victoria went pale. You can't, she started, and then the second officer's radio crackled. Dispatch confirmed it. Trespassing on private property, multiple parties involved. Around us, guests began to scatter barefoot and embarrassed, clutching towels like fugitives. Doug tried to explain. Officer, this is a misunderstanding. But then one guest, red-faced and scratching at his arm, shouted, Man, my skin's on fire. You put something in the water. The officer turned to me. Sir, did you put anything chemical in the pool? I nodded, steady. Chlorine, standard maintenance level, like every Saturday. You can test it if you want. He called it in, and within 10 minutes the kit came back. No harmful substances detected, just normal chlorine and minerals. The silence that followed felt almost delicious. Victoria stood trembling, humiliated. You planned this, she spat. You planned the party, I said simply. I just kept the cameras rolling. Her stare could have burned a hole through me. You think you're clever? You won't get away with this. I smiled quiet. I already have. Then she snapped. Before anyone could stop her, she lunged and slapped me on the shoulder. More a desperate flail than a planned strike. But it was enough. The tall officer grabbed her wrist. Ma'am, that's assault, he said firm. Calm down, or you'll be placed under arrest. She's the criminal. Victoria screamed, twisting. He's poisoning the community. The second officer moved in and put cuffs on her. Doug just stood there, helpless. One of the kids started crying. The officer read her rights. Detained for trespassing and assault. Neighbors gathered in doorways and on lawns, whispering and recording on their phones. I leaned against the fence and let it all play out. After months of HOA letters, petty fines, and having my home treated like a public pool, this felt like the moment the script flipped. There she was, handcuffed, barefoot, soaked, marked by those red blotches, and I won't pretend I didn't feel a small, private satisfaction. Maybe I even smiled. The officers told me I'd need to file a statement at the station later. No problem, I said. I'd bring the footage. Victoria thrashed as they put her in the cruiser. You'll regret this, Anthony, she screamed. I raised my glass and said, Already regretted letting you swim. The car drove off, and the silence that followed was, for once mine, broken only by the soft hum of the pool filter. Doug hung back near the fence, awkward and quiet. Look, Anthony, he muttered. I didn't think it'd go this far. I replied, calmer than I felt. Maybe now it'll finally stop. He only nodded and walked home with a towel over his shoulder. Inside, I replayed the footage just to be certain. Every trespass, every unauthorized gathering, the slap, clean, legal evidence. I poured a drink and settled into my chair. For the first time in months, my backyard was empty, quiet mind. By morning, my inbox was full. HOA members emailing, some angry, some apologetic. The neighborhood chat blew up. HOA president arrested after backyard incident. By noon, the board called an emergency meeting. I didn't go. The facts were already out there. That afternoon, I walked past Victoria's house. The curtains were drawn, the yard dark and silent. For the first time, her place felt small. I looked at my own pool shining under the porch light and let out a soft, satisfied peace. It fit. But I also knew people like Victoria didn't disappear quietly. She'd come back swinging if she could. So I spent the next week preparing, printing footage, collecting statements, organizing timestamps, and assembling a neat little envelope labeled for HOA records, property use violations, and leadership misconduct. Inside went a USB drive with everything. When the next board session came, I didn't have to attend. The neighbors did the rest. Victoria's name was voted off the board unanimously. The meeting minutes even recorded her parting line as she stormed out. This neighborhood has gone to hell because of him. Maybe it had, maybe it hadn't. Either way, my pool had never looked better. You'd think being handcuffed and marched out would teach her a lesson. But people in that mindset don't learn, they retaliate. The very next morning, a typed note appeared on my mailbox. An HOA-stamped notice claiming pending investigation for property hazards and misuse of pool chemicals. Clearly from Victoria's old stationery. She'd been removed less than a day earlier, yet she still tried to pull strings. I laughed, crumpled the paper, and threw it away. The gossip mill churned. Texts, memes, jokes. Someone even made a photo of Victoria's arrest with the caption, HOA justice served. I admit, it made me grin. 3 days later, she returned. It was a bright Wednesday. I was trimming hedges when her silver SUV rolled up. She emerged in a wide hat and huge sunglasses, dragging a box of files behind Doug. Her voice was all syrup. Anthony, she said, I came to apologize for the misunderstanding. Is that what you're calling trespass and assault now? I asked. She smiled brittle. The board overreacted. Once they see reason, I'll be reinstated. Before your lawyer calls mine? I folded my arms. Her jaw tightened. You're clever, Anthony, but I know what you did. That powder, whatever it was, you're lucky no one will sue you. I nodded slowly. The tests were clean. So unless your guests are allergic to justice, I think we're good. She tried to scream, but couldn't find the breath. Instead, she gave a cold, polite smile. Enjoy your little victory. It won't last. Then she left, sweeping away with Doug. She didn't come back for a few days, but the trouble didn't stop. Anonymous HOA complaints about odors, lighting, imaginary modifications arrived in my mailbox. I ignored them. Let her waste the ink. Revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about noise. It was about elegance. I wanted something that closed the chapter properly. So I didn't rush. I kept polishing the evidence and, leaving a little surprise and reserve, got my pool ready for something else. A plan to make it official, to put the neighborhood's attention where it needed to be. One evening, browsing local event listings, I found a site that rented private spaces for small gatherings and shoots, and an idea began to take shape. They were always looking for beautiful backdrops, gardens, patios, and stylish backyards for photo shoots or small events. So I thought, why not? I sent in a few photos of my place. The pool tiles gleaming under the sunset, the string lights reflecting on the blue water. Within a week, I had 4 bookings lined up. Small, legitimate groups. Nothing crazy, all respectful, all paying. By Saturday, my backyard wasn't just private again, it was profitable. And, by pure coincidence, that same morning was Victoria's disciplinary hearing with the HOA board. The sun was out, the air crisp, and for once, the street felt peaceful. Later that afternoon, a van pulled up with a photographer and a young couple there for their engagement shoot. They were kind, polite, grateful to use the space. Enjoy it, I said with a smile. Just don't invite the neighbors. They laughed, not realizing that wasn't entirely a joke. A few hours later, I heard a familiar sound, the sharp slam of a car door across the street. Victoria was back. Even from my deck, I could tell it hadn't gone well for her. She froze when she saw the couple near my pool, the photographer snapping away as the sun dipped low. Her expression shifted from disbelief to fury in seconds. She marched across the street, heels striking the pavement like gunfire. "What is this?" she barked through the gate. "You can't rent out your property. It's against HOA policy." The photographer looked startled. Ma'am, we have permission." "Not from the HOA, you don't," she snapped. "This is a residential area." I stepped outside, waving cheerfully. "Afternoon, Victoria. You look tense. Board meeting go well." Her eyes flashed. "You think this is funny, Anthony?" You can't turn your pool into a business. I tilted my head, pretending to think. Actually, according to Section 3A of the HOA Charter, which you wrote, by the way, there's no restriction on private event hosting under 10 attendees. You might want to reread your own bylaws. Her face went red. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped mid-sentence when the realization hit. She had literally signed that rule herself years ago. I leaned against the gate. Oh, and don't worry. I make sure everyone cleans up. Unlike some people. The couple giggled nervously, and the photographer tried to stay focused on his shots, clearly wishing he could vanish. Victoria pointed a trembling finger at me. You're making a mockery of this neighborhood. I smiled. No, Victoria. You already did that. I'm just charging admission. Her jaw worked silently before she turned and stormed off again. I went back inside, feeling that quiet satisfaction rise in my chest. For once, I didn't have to shout or fight. The truth was loud enough on its own. When someone keeps pushing your boundaries, you eventually learn. The best revenge isn't yelling back. It's thriving so loudly they can't stand to watch. Over the next week, the bookings kept coming. A small family photo shoot, a yoga class, even a birthday brunch. Every guest was respectful and kind. And every single contract had one special clause. Unauthorized entry prohibited under HOA trespassing law. It was legal, poetic, and deeply satisfying. Each time a new car arrived, I saw Victoria peeking through her curtains, fuming silently. Her husband stopped waving altogether. Her kids avoided eye contact when they rode their bikes past my house. By the end of summer, her world had shrunk to her front porch and the empty street. Then one morning, I noticed a for sale by owner sign on her lawn. I almost didn't believe it, but the neighborhood gossip confirmed it. After losing her HOA position and facing multiple fines for misuse of authority, Victoria was drowning in debt. Her pride wouldn't let her stay in a place where everyone knew her fall from grace. The last time I saw her, she was loading boxes into her SUV. She caught me watching from my porch. For a moment, our eyes met, hers full of bitterness, mine calm, maybe even a little amused. She didn't say a word, just slammed the door and drove off. As her taillights disappeared down Maplewood Drive, I finally exhaled. The quiet I'd wanted from the beginning had returned. Only now, it came with the sweet aftertaste of justice. I looked out over my pool, the same one that had caused so much chaos, and smiled at the way the water shimmered under the evening light. Peace, real peace, and maybe a little victory. Still, I couldn't resist one last touch of closure. That night, I replaced the old wooden sign by the pool gate with a new one. Simple black letters on white metal. Private property, members only. And underneath, in smaller print, no Karens allowed. The next morning, I woke to a knock at the door. Sharp, rhythmic, and official. The kind of knock that says, "This isn't the pizza guy." When I opened it, 2 police officers stood there. One of them was the tall officer from the dye trap incident. He gave me a polite nod. "Mr. Lewis," he said evenly, "we received a report about ongoing disturbances related to your property. Do you have a moment to talk?" I sighed. Let me guess who filed it. The shorter officer checked his notepad. A Mrs. Victoria Whitmore. Of course. I invited them in, offered coffee, and laid everything out. The rental contracts, the HOA bylaws, even the report for Victoria's trespassing and assault case. They looked through everything quietly. Finally, the tall one said, "To be honest, sir, it looks like you're doing everything by the book." "That's the goal," I said, smiling, though I'm guessing she's not too happy about it. He smirked. "You'd be right about that. Between us, she's been to the station twice this week trying to reopen her case. Says you used chemical warfare substances." I chuckled. "Tell her to take it up with the pool filter." They laughed, thanked me for the coffee, and left. I thought that would be the end of it. But with Victoria, nothing ever ends cleanly. By afternoon, she was back, in full HOA battle mode. Clipboard, sunglasses, and that same tight smile that usually meant trouble. I was relaxing by the pool, enjoying the rare peace, when she stormed through the open gate. "Anthony," she barked, "we need to talk about your business operations." I set my book down and looked up, pretending to be surprised. "You mean my backyard?" She ignored the sarcasm. You're in violation of HOA zoning regulations. Hosting public events is illegal without prior authorization. Not according to Section 3. I replied evenly, quoting her own bylaw word for word. 10 guests or fewer, private events only. I even have them sign a clause that says no HOA liability. Her jaw tightened. Don't play games. You're mocking this neighborhood. I leaned forward. No, Victoria. I'm just using the same rules you used against everyone else. For a second, she didn't move. Then her face hardened. You think you're some kind of hero? She hissed. You've turned this street into a circus. Everyone's talking about you, about me. You humiliated me. I met her glare calmly. You humiliated yourself. I just hit record. That did it. She snapped. Before I could react, she slapped me across the face. Not hard enough to knock me over, but sharp enough to sting. For a split second, she froze, eyes flickering between anger and regret. Then she spat. You deserve that. You've poisoned this place. Unfortunately for her, the tall officer, the same one, was standing right outside my fence. He'd come by to return a document I'd accidentally left in his car. Perfect timing. He stepped forward. Ma'am, put your hands where I can see them. Victoria spun around. Officer, this isn't. He provoked me. I watched the whole thing, he said firmly. That's assault. Her eyes widened. You can't arrest me for... Turn around, ma'am. He cuffed her right there. I didn't even bother hiding my smile this time. Doug came running across the street, pale and panicked. Victoria, what are you doing? She hit me. I said simply. Doug groaned, covering his face. God, Vic. The officer read her rights as the neighbors gathered again. Deja vu. The flashing lights, the whispers, the phones recording from behind curtains. And there she was, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, once again being led to a police car. This time, she didn't shout or argue. She just glared through the window, pure hatred behind those designer sunglasses. When the car drove off, the officer turned to me. I think that's the last time you'll have to deal with her. I smirked. I've heard that before. He chuckled. Fair point. But between us, the DA's office is looking into her misuse of HOA funds. Someone sent them a flash drive full of evidence. I raised an eyebrow. Really? He smiled. Anonymous tip. I gave a knowing grin. How convenient. After he left, I sat back in my chair, looking out at the pool, the quiet, rippling water that had somehow witnessed all of this chaos. The sun shimmered on the surface, calm and steady. And for the first time, it felt like the storm had finally passed. It finally looked peaceful again. Mine again. But I couldn't shake one thought. This was never really about a pool. It was about people like Victoria. People who think community means control, who hide behind authority to bully others. And for once, she met someone who wouldn't bow. The next few days were quiet, almost unnervingly so. No more HOA letters, no footsteps on my deck. No music floating over the fence. It felt like the whole neighborhood had exhaled at once. Then one morning, I found a note on my porch. Not typed, not official, handwritten, shaky, and surprisingly humble. Anthony, I'm leaving Maplewood Heights. I wanted to tell you I never hated you. I just hated losing control. Take care of your pool. It's a beautiful thing. Victoria. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and set it on the counter. That afternoon, I watched her SUV pull out of the driveway for the last time. No audience, no drama, just the hum of the engine fading down the street. Doug stayed behind for a few days to handle the sale. When he came by to drop off some HOA documents, he looked tired but lighter somehow. She was a hurricane, man, he said quietly, and I just stood in the middle of it for too long. I nodded. You're not the first person she's dragged into the storm. He gave a small, sad smile. You know, despite everything, she respected you. She'd never admit it, but she did. I laughed softly. That's one way to put it. He handed me an envelope from the HOA board. You want to see this? Inside was a letter of appreciation, a formal thank you for providing evidence that uncovered financial mismanagement under Victoria's presidency. They'd found thousands of dollars in miscellaneous expenses tied to her personal accounts. They called it embezzlement. I called it karma. That night, I stood on my deck again, a glass in hand, watching the moon ripple across the pool's surface. The water was calm, the air still. No shouting, no trespassing, no chaos. Just peace, the one thing I'd wanted all along. I took a slow sip and muttered to myself, all that trouble, just because someone couldn't take a no. Then I smiled, remembering her note, the part about control. People like Victoria never understand that control isn't power. Pieces. The next morning, I added one last finishing touch to the backyard. A small wooden sign next to the pool gate, painted by hand. Private pool. Keep out. Especially you, Victoria. When my friends came over and saw it, they burst out laughing. And for once, I did too, a real full laugh. The kind that only comes after a long, exhausting fight you finally win. I didn't know it then, but that laugh would echo around Maplewood Heights for years. People started telling the story of the man who stood up to the HOA tyrant and won. Not with rage or revenge, but with patience, wit, and a little creativity. And somewhere out there, I hope Victoria heard it too. Maybe she finally learned what boundaries really meant. It's funny how silence can feel louder than noise. For months, this neighborhood had been a battlefield, filled with complaints, gossip, and Victoria's constant voice. But once she left, Maplewood Heights became quiet. Peacefully quiet. No more HOA letters. No fake smiles over hedges. Just the sound of birds, the breeze, and my pool filter humming softly. At first, the calm felt unreal. Every time I stepped outside, I half expected her SUV to roll up again or hear her call out, "Anthony, we need to talk about your pool maintenance schedule." But she was gone. Still, her name lingered like a ghost, whispered in passing, joked about in text threads, even printed in the local paper. They ran a small story. Former HOA president under investigation for financial misconduct. They mentioned possible embezzlement and misuse of authority. The article didn't name me, but everyone in Maplewood Heights knew how it all started. Within days, my neighbors' attitudes shifted completely. People who once avoided me now waved, smiled, even brought over baked goods. The same residents who'd once hidden behind her authority were suddenly grateful. It began with a knock on my door one afternoon. Mrs. Jenkins, the retired teacher from 2 houses down, stood there holding a basket of cookies. "Anthony," she said softly, "thank you." We all wanted to stand up to her, but none of us had the courage. I chuckled. "You mean for surviving Victoria's reign?" She laughed, embarrassed. "We used to joke she ran this place like a tiny dictatorship. Guess it's not a joke anymore." Soon others came too. The mechanic from across the street, the single mom from the corner house, even old Mr. Kim, who barely spoke to anyone. They all had stories. Unfair fines, mysterious complaints, threats that sounded a lot like her tone. I listened, nodded, and realized something. This wasn't just about me. I hadn't just defended my yard. I'd freed an entire neighborhood from a bully. Within a week, the HOA held elections to replace Victoria. For the first time ever, I got nominated. I almost laughed when they told me. Me? The guy who was nearly banned from his own pool. The treasurer grinned. "Exactly. You care more about fairness than rules." I thought about it for a moment. The idea of sitting in her old chair, holding that same clipboard she once used like a weapon. I could have done it, for irony's sake if nothing else. But in the end, I declined. "I don't need power," I said. "I just need peace." The crowd actually applauded. It felt strange but good, like closing a book that had been open for far too long. A few days later, the new HOA president, a calm young woman named Rachel, stopped by. "I just wanted to apologize on behalf of the board," she said sincerely. "What Victoria did was unacceptable. We've refunded every fine she ever gave you." I smiled. "Don't worry about it. Consider it tuition. I'll learn more about HOA law than I ever wanted to." She laughed. "You might want to keep your footage safe." The investigators said it's helping them close a few old complaints. Then she told me something I didn't expect. The county audit had found over $80,000 in HOA funds unaccounted for, spent on beautification projects that never existed. Landscaping, event budgets, consulting fees, all under Victoria's name. She'd been milking the neighborhood for years, and nobody had questioned her until now. When the news broke, her world collapsed. Her real estate license was suspended, her credit destroyed, and her reputation in the local realtor circle gone. In a strange way, it felt poetic. The woman who'd built her image on control and appearances had undone herself. A few nights later, Doug stopped by again. He looked different. No golf shirt, no fake smile, just tired eyes and hands shoved deep in his jacket. "Hey, Anthony," he said quietly. "Doug." He hesitated. "She's not coming back. We sold a house. She's staying with her sister in Arizona, trying to sort things out." "Good for her," I said simply. He nodded, then sighed. "You know, I should have stopped her. I saw what she was doing, the fines, the threats, but I didn't have the guts." I studied him for a moment. "Fear's powerful," I said, "especially when someone hides behind authority. But doing nothing is still a choice." He looked down, nodded slowly, and then walked away. For a long time after he left, I just sat there, listening to the quiet, watching the pool lights dance on the surface of the water. For the first time since I'd moved to Maplewood Heights, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Yeah, you're right. We stood in silence for a moment. Two men who had lived under the same shadow, one from across the fence, the other from across the dinner table. Before he left, Doug turned back and said quietly, "For what it's worth, thanks for standing up to her. You did what none of us could." After he drove off, I looked at the empty house across the street. The for sale sign now read sold, and the porch light that had glared at me every night was finally dark. That was when it hit me. The war was over. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the quiet sink in. The next morning, I decided to celebrate in the most fitting way possible, a real neighborhood gathering. No HOA agendas, no fake smiles, no petty rules. Just people, real neighbors. We grilled burgers, played music, laughed, kids splashed in the pool with permission this time, and adults toasted to finally being free. At one point, Mrs. Jenkins raised her glass and shouted, "To Anthony, the man who ended the HOA tyranny." Everyone cheered. I laughed, embarrassed but touched. To common sense, I shouted back, "May it never go out of style." The sound of laughter filled the air, honest and unforced. It was the first real community moment Maplewood Heights had seen in years. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the water orange and gold, I realized something simple but profound. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the result of standing your ground, even when it's uncomfortable. Victoria had built her kingdom on control. I'd rebuilt mine on boundaries. And in the end, that made all the difference. Later that night, after the guests left and the yard quieted again, I caught my reflection in the water. Older, calmer, maybe a little wiser. I raised my glass one last time to no one in particular. Here's to peace and the price you have to pay to keep it. The ripples shimmered, carrying the light across the surface like a promise. For the first time since moving to Maplewood Heights, I truly felt like I belonged. No more HOA letters, no more power plays, no more Karen wars. Just me, my home, and the water, still clear, finally mine. A month passed. The neighborhood barbecue was a memory, but peace had settled in a Maplewood Heights like a long overdue sunrise. The laughter from that night still echoed in my head every time I sat on my porch sipping coffee. For the first time in years, I could open my mailbox without finding a complaint, a fine, or a threat disguised as friendly advice. The only letters now were coupons and a thank you note from the new HOA president, Rachel. "Thank you for restoring sanity to our community." I thought that was the end, the final curtain call of the HOA saga. But life had one last twist waiting. It started on a random Tuesday morning. I was cleaning the pool filters when a man in a crisp suit walked toward my driveway, briefcase in hand. Professional, sharp, a little imposing. "Mr. Anthony Lewis?" "Yes," I said cautiously. He extended his hand. "Detective Alan Morris, County Financial Crimes Division. We're wrapping up the investigation into your former HOA president, Mrs. Victoria Whitmore." I straightened, heart kicking up. "Oh, that. I figure it was already over." "Not quite," he said, smiling faintly. "We uncovered more than expected, and it seems you played a bigger role than you realize." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Printed reports, bank statements, and screenshots of HOA transactions. Some had Victoria's signature, others were forged. She had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, travel, luxury goods, even renovations on her vacation home. But your footage and the files you submitted anonymously, he explained, gave us a timeline we couldn't get anywhere else. I raised an eyebrow. You're saying my petty revenge helped a county investigation? He chuckled. More than helped. It started it. Because of that evidence, we froze 3 of her accounts and recovered over $90,000 in stolen HOA dues. I let out a low whistle. Guess she really was allergic to honesty. The detective handed me a printed property record. Bold letters read, Property foreclosure, 281 Maplewood Drive. New owner, Anthony Lewis. For a moment, I thought it was a joke, I said. Wait, what? He asked. Her house went up for auction after she defaulted on her mortgage. You were listed as an eligible buyer because of your previous claim in the trespassing and damages case. The bank accepted your bid automatically. No one else matched it. I blinked. You're telling me I own her house? Technically, yes. Paperwork processed, deed arriving in a few days. I had to laugh. The irony was perfect. The woman who once claimed my pool as community property had lost her house to me. When the detective left, I stared at her old yard. The lawn wild, paint peeling, roses brown. Her house, once a symbol of control, her empire, her throne, now empty, silent, and mine. The next weekend, I walked over with the keys the bank had mailed me. Inside, the air was stale, a mix of perfume and dust, a faint reminder of her attempts to cover decay. Furniture gone, energy lingering. Walls lined with old HOA plaques and leadership quotes like confidence starts here. I almost snorted. I explored slowly, expecting her voice to echo. Anthony, community standards. But there was only silence. Then I stepped into the backyard. From this angle, I could see my pool, my deck, my patio perfectly framed, the same view she had used to justify claiming it as a shared amenity. The irony hit like sunlight through a window. This wasn't just victory. It was closure. Every insult, every fine, every petty fight had led to this. I sat on her back porch steps, staring across at my own home. Peace glimmered under the afternoon sun. For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward her, just pity. Victoria hadn't been my enemy. She had been her own. Pride, control, obsession with domination that had destroyed her. I decided to turn her house into something new, something positive. By summer, I cleaned it, repainted the walls, restored the garden, and turned it into a guest suite for visiting friends and family. I named it the Blue Haven Annex. When the renovations finished, I hosted a small celebration. Neighbors, a little food, soft music. Mrs. Jenkins raised her glass again. To Anthony, who turned chaos into calm. Everyone laughed, clinked glasses. No tension, no traces of the past. I looked around at the neighborhood, the houses, the smiles, and felt a deep, quiet peace. That night, after everyone left, I sat on her porch, gazing at my pool glowing under the moonlight. From this side, it looked smaller, quieter, but victorious. Not gloating, just surviving something ugly and finding beauty on the other side. As the crickets hummed and the night breeze carried the faint scent of chlorine, I whispered, You see that, Victoria? You finally made this place better. Just not the way you thought. Then I smiled and headed back home. Looking back now, I realized this story was never about a pool or an HOA. It was about boundaries, the invisible lines that protect peace, respect, and dignity. People like Victoria exist everywhere. They confuse control with power, kindness with weakness. But control without respect always collapses. Sooner or later, arrogance drowns in the water it stirs. I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean fighting loud. Sometimes it means staying calm, collecting proof, and letting karma write the final chapter. And if you're lucky, that chapter ends with laughter, a quiet backyard, and a pool that finally belongs to no one but you.